Each of us is a unique expression of God. We all have available to us all the qualities, all the capacities, all the potential that is inherent in spirit. But each of our souls works with that, expresses that in a slightly different way. When we come together then in community, even if those communities are all under the same umbrella, they'll be unique. So every Unity Spiritual Center is unique because of the people that make it up. And so we've gone so far as to identify our core values, values that we align with and that can give people that are coming and visiting our community a sense of who we are, allow them to know whether this might be their community. But more importantly, it invites all of us to continue to grow. Because one thing that we're seeing in this series on our core values is that a core value, a strong core value, is always inviting us into greater expression of our nature as a Christed being, as a spiritual being. And it is an ongoing process. As I said in the opening prayer, it's a process of unlearning who we've taken ourselves to be and beginning to open up to that dynamic expression, that dynamic and fresh even expression of what it is to be a spiritual being. So far, we've looked at our core value of community, spirit-led, and inspiration. And today, we continue on with authenticity. We define authenticity, and this is part of the beauty of our core values. We get to define it. And we say, as our definition, grounded in spirit, we align our actions with our genuine beliefs, principles, and intentions. And the key there is grounded in spirit. I don't know, I'm actually sure that you guys have had an experience similar to mine where maybe someone has attacked me or someone is not being they're being rude or, there's something going on where it's really not working for me. And I've had the confidence to express how I'm responding to what's going on for them. And they come back with, well, I'm sorry that you're hurt or I'm sorry that you're upset, but I am just being myself and get over it. Indeed, sometimes when we're being our authentic self, we are going to upset people. More specifically, we are probably upsetting egos. Because when we're being our authentic self, we're often not moving along with the pack. We are stating what our truth in the moment is, and that can be frustrating to ego. It will not be frustrating to the spirit within. The spirit within is always adaptable, malleable, adjustable, ready for the challenge, curious. This is part of that aliveness. And so how do we sort out when we might be caught in ego or when we really truly are standing in our authentic self? One key is whether we feel the need to defend ourselves. And we know that feeling, right? When you jump in, when you're irritated that someone brought that up, there's some ego involved. Doesn't mean it's all ego, but there's something inside that's separate, feels it needs to defend itself, stand up for itself. The other thing to look for is whether you're responding with a sense of compassion and empathy and love, or whether you're responding from something angry or cold, hatred. You see, when we are standing in our authentic self, there is always a sense of relationship with the other. Not needing to necessarily merge or appease the other, but love, our nature, is what tears down boundaries and allows us to simply be with one another authentically. I love the rationale that we offered for this core value. When we express our true selves, our hearts open and barriers fall. And I would extend that from my own experience since we developed these to say that also there's a great potential that other people's hearts open and any barriers that they're feeling fall. I've been participating in a retreat, a spiritual retreat this week. It's probably more accurate to say that it's a spiritual training. And the nature, as you know, of a spiritual training is to invite you into an even deeper experience of what you are as a spiritual being, to at least lay out the potential for you. And that often is triggering to our ego. I don't know exactly for everyone what it is. I know for me, my ego feels like it's once again being asked to let go of more control, that I'm getting out there in some way that it cannot control. And I tend to just naturally tense up. In this retreat, I've had a lot of deficiency up and, my goodness, how am I ever going to get there? All ego responses, right? So on one particular training, one particular talk really got to me in the fact that I was sitting there feeling very deficient, feeling about, this small, wondering how the heck I ever made it to be a teacher in that discipline and whether I really should resign because I could not really relate to what the presenter was talking about. And the presenter kept saying, now, of course, you're going to want to help your students with this. So we were assigned to an exercise, and one of the beauties of Zoom is you don't get to choose who you're going to work with. They just push the button, and you are put into a breakout room. And in this case, in this retreat, not all the teachers, but I was put in a large group of teachers, no idea who I was going to work with. When we got into the breakout room, one of the gentlemen I was working with said, I'd like to go first. I really understand this subject. And he proceeded to spend his 15 minutes just laying out all these experiences. He even went so far as said, I don't really want to talk about what's just presented. I want to take you even further into the subject as I understand it. And that didn't help me very much. I started to really tense up. I felt like a giant knots in my belly. And the other thing that was interesting is I felt quite alone and disconnected as this gentleman just sort of rambled on about his insight about this subject. After he finished, the woman we were working with asked if she could go next, and the contrast was astounding. She started out by saying, I feel nervous. I couldn't really understand what he was talking about, or maybe more precisely, I think I understood, but I have not had the experience. And it makes me nervous about being a teacher in our discipline because I can't relate to the experience. She was very open. She was very vulnerable with us about what was going on. And interestingly enough, as she just continued to follow her experience, this is a theme that we've been seeing in our work this year. As she followed her experience, stayed with it, didn't judge it, being very honest with it, she actually got to where she started to experience what the talk was about. It was powerful. And I want to acknowledge that when she finished, the other gentleman said, wow, that was impressive. And I can see that I did my entire monologue from my head. I wasn't willing to acknowledge that I too am uncomfortable with this subject. Then it was my turn. And those two, through their comments, just really paved the way. I'm feeling a lot less deficient, although I started out saying, gosh, when we started out, I was immersed in deficiency, thinking I should turn in my resignation, what's going on here? But I am feeling much more open and relaxed thanks to the sense of connection that I'm feeling with you two. And as I stayed with my experience, I had a very dramatic experience of what the presenter was talking about. It felt like such a blessing. And I felt that through first the woman really paving the way by coming right out and talking about her fear and her deficiency, and then the gentleman going back and saying, oh, I see that I was coming from my head. It was very permission-giving to me, for me to simply be myself. And in that, a potential that I was unaware of could even be a potential in me came to be. And so we begin to see, don't we, that these core values, they dance together. Those, particularly the woman and then the follow-up that the man did, they inspired me. It was very inspiring to me. It was very real. And we formed a little community. Even though we didn't know each other well, we formed a community of support. I'm cleaning out a bunch of old files. I actually ran into some notes from when we developed these core values, and I had written this as a possible statement, a possible definition for authenticity. I share who I am in the moment. I share who I am in the moment. You see, in the moment is a key addition, because to the ego, you are a continuation, a continuum of the same expression. The ego only has a certain number of ways that it responds to life, and it likes knowing who it is and who you are through those patterns. But the spirit in us is alive and dynamic and malleable and responding and loves to respond and is always curious and never feels baffled by an issue. And so we can be very, very different from this moment to the next. And there's something really lovely about that. And so, the question that I have is, where have you risked being authentic this week in your life? Recognizing that there's a risk to it. Where have you risked being authentic this week? Or in the last couple of weeks? And we could also tweak the question, where do you see that you miss the opportunity to be authentic? And to allow yourself to feel the impact of that. Because it's an invitation. Now, it can all sound so simple. But the truth is that when we are asked to be authentic in an area that challenges our ego structure, we can end up feeling very unsupported. And it can be chaotic and challenging. Stuart and I, for a few years now, Stuart, my partner, and I have been toying around with the idea of moving to the mountains. Every time we go there, we feel at home, nurtured, expansive. We tried 3 years ago. We put an offer in on a house, and it was very interesting. My issue of needing to regulate, I usually say that I'm an accommodator, but as I've been practicing the RAIN process more, being willing to do that deep dive into what are these patterns that I live from, I think it's more that in my family of origin, I came to the conclusion that if I could help regulate my parents, which often meant trying to keep my herd of siblings, somewhat under control, and certainly to keep myself under control, that I would feel a greater sense of safety and love from my parents. The interesting thing about trying to regulate someone is you have to attune to them, and often it means giving up what's true for you in the moment, what it is that you're feeling called to do or how you're feeling called to be in the moment. And so that's a deep-seated pattern in me. And for my partner, Stuart, we can get, if you know him, he's Iraqi and he's very expressive. His energy is going, he'll be in the mountains. I love this. We've got to get here. And then we go back to Denver and, oh, I love this house. I can't let this house go. I have to ask him, so are you upset? No, I'm just Iraqi, but there's all sorts of energy, and it triggers me really into this pattern of thinking that I need to attune to the other, that really it's not okay, right, for me to continue to hold to what my truth is. And what I got to see, so we quite unexpectedly had an opportunity on a house in the mountains. And we put an offer in just 2.5 weeks ago, and we got it. We offered a quick close, so we closed on it on Friday. And let me just tell you, this 2.5 weeks have been quite a journey. Not pretty, because a lot of my sense of safety comes from helping regulate, right? Probably why I got called into ministry, so I can learn that you really can't regulate everybody, but I try often. So what I got to see clearly was, while I would have loved to have been able to tell you, I just really put that regulation on the back burner, and I was able to hold Stuart in all sorts of love as we kept moving forward. Oh, no. No, I mean, definitely a will rose in me that said, yeah, we're going to do this. I could just feel the support. But at times, that support would disappear. Maybe when Stuart was saying, I can't imagine leaving this house. This house is everything to me. And then I'd get angry. I'd feel that crumbling of support, and yet I feel like, no, this is what we're supposed to do, and you're not supporting me, and does anybody support me? Can you hear the ego in there? But it's what we go through. And we got in fight in front of our realtor, and we got in fights in front of friends, not pretty. And yet, I would say to you, this is what we have to go through. Because eventually, it started to become more and more comfortable, definitely more comfortable, to the point that we both slid into the closing, maybe a little nervous because it's a big leap for us, because change is not always easy, and yet very excited. And so I point that out because my ego would have been just delighted. It would have been overjoyed if I had said, well, boy, this seems to be upsetting Stuart, so we better abandon this great dream we have of moving to the mountains. Because you see, then it would have been safe, and my ego could have relaxed. My ego isn't exactly relaxed through this. Especially, the universe just loves to keep it coming, guys. Because we closed on Friday, we put our house up for sale on Friday, and we went under contract this morning. So it's like, oh, now we have to get out of our house faster than we thought. So life invites you into authenticity. There's a wonderful passage in the Bible. It's in Romans. You're going to recognize it. Don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that you may prove what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. And what does it mean, Bonnie, if you'll just leave that up for a while, what does it mean to prove what is the will of God? We're not talking about some character out in the sky that has some will for you. We're talking about something that your soul has come in to accomplish. And the truth is, we're not just talking about one thing. Our souls all, and life, the world judges some of them as big things, others as little things, but we've come in to express a potential. And we're not saying even that potential is laid in stone as to how it needs to be expressed. Isn't it funny? We can pass up opportunities, and often they come around again in a different way. That is the will of God. That is the calling of your very soul. And it's going to be good and acceptable and perfect. We're going to hold those in quotes, but there is something really powerful about coming forward with our truth and allowing whatever is to become manifest to come manifest. And then there's another great quote by Andre, I think it might just be Guide, or I'm not sure how you pronounce it, Gide. Anyway, what did you say, Bonnie? Gide, maybe? That's probably true. It's better to be hated for who you are than to be liked for who you're not. Amen, brother. And let's hope that it doesn't come to the point of hatred, okay? Because as we saw with the little triad that I did my exercise with, that as we're willing to be authentic, it has a way of touching people in their hearts. And their egos may initially be all bent out of shape, but my experience is that we all come around. It can sound so easy, right? Just be authentic. Just be who you really are. We don't really realize how much of what we do is unconsciously patterned into us. And that much of being authentic is allowing Spirit just to roll as us, to become an empty vessel for Spirit. And so it's a process of unlearning, but be prepared. It's chaotic, it's scary, it's going to could potentially bring out qualities in you that you're not proud of. And yet, it's part of what it takes to grow. And that growth is incredibly rewarding. Let's take some time then to help integrate this by spending time together in an extended meditation. As Janice and Steve are taking their places, I invite you to take another deep breath. Maybe right now you're sort of immersed in, oh my gosh, all the ways that I have patterns. Look at these patterns, or what are my patterns? See if you can breathe into that and just make some space. Let it go. It's okay. In this moment, it's all okay. I'm going to close my eyes just to orient more deeply to my interiority, to recognize that the Spirit that is me loves me so deeply. The Spirit that is you loves you so deeply that it continues to unfold a life that invites me into letting go of the patterns that have ruled me, patterns that were often established through the circumstances of my childhood, patterns that no longer serve me as an adult, patterns that actually don't serve the people around me, patterns that limit the potential that is Spirit as me. And so as I so often in my own process say, reveal what needs to be revealed, heal what needs to be healed, bring conscious that which I have not been conscious to. For in this moment, I'm ready to live my life I don't want to live the life that was necessary in order to get me through my childhood, a life that's heavily influenced by the culture of my family, the culture that I grew up in, the culture of the church. What is my life? I'm open. I'm receptive. I'm ready. And from that openness now, we allow ourselves to just gently settle into the silence, allowing Spirit to do what Spirit does best in us, to guide us, to inspire us in the silence.